more friends. Thank you very much for coming.
I would like to thank you to Professor Da Silva for the opening speech. Now, Professor Victorino, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Just a few words to say that, as mentioned by our rector, we are deeply pleased and honored by the presence of such distinguished speakers today. And on behalf of CU, the entity that runs UAL, I would like also to offer my sincere congratulations to the organizing committee of this notable conference, namely Professors Ozgur, Tufekci, Luís, Nuno, Rodrigues, and Luís Tomé. In a word, I wish you all the best for the extremely interesting panels we can foresee in your agenda. So I say thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Ozgur.
Thank you very much, Professor Victorino. I would like to thank you for joining us, all the participants. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 7th IEPAS 2020 conference. The sixth one of the Eurasian conference was held in Lisbon last year with the cooperation of UAL and Observare. Since that cooperation was very fruitful, we had decided to organize the conference in Lisbon with the same partners this year. As the Director General of CESRAN International, I would like to mention that we are glad to have such a sincere partnership, and I believe that this year's conference reflects that sincerity. This year covers a wide array of topics. There are about 70 presentations and debates over 3 days. And unfortunately, it is not possible to meet in person with the presenters this year due to COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. However, I'm sure that if you keep up with the IEPAS conference series, we may meet you next September in Lisbon. And the conference aims to bring together a range of academics and practitioners to discuss new directions of research and discovery on Eurasian studies. As all of you are fully aware of that, current politics and developments in Eurasia is now and will be detrimental for world politics. That's why the organizing committee and I believe that the conference itself and its outputs, such as books, journal articles, commentaries, will definitely contribute to not only the Eurasian studies, but also political and international studies in the world. That's why I would like to emphasize that the success of IEPAS 2020 is a result of tremendous support and contribution from the academic staff of CESRAN International, UAL, Observare, and our partner Center for International Studies. The conference couldn't have happened without the commitment of the organizing committee, who helped in many ways to organize this event. Finally, we are also very grateful to the participants for helping us to put together this year's IEPAS conference. Let me wish to all participants to enjoy the conference and hope to see you next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ozgur. And on behalf of Observare, Observatory of Foreign Relations of Autonomous University of Lisbon, let me begin by welcoming all participants to the 7th International Conference on Eurasian Politics and Society. I'd like also to express our special gratitude and recognition to Center for Strategic Research and Analysis, CESRAN, to which Observare has once again teamed up to co-organize this conference, as well to our partners, Center for International Studies of ISCTE Lisbon, and of course to all members of the organizing and scientific committees of IEPAS 2020, our warm thanks for your competence and diligence. Allow me also to underline the presence of my university's rector, Professor José Amado da Silva, and the Board of Administration here represented by Professor José Guilherme Vitorino. Our many thanks for supporting this conference and joining us in this opening session. As last year, IEPAS 2020 was initially scheduled to take place here in Lisbon at Autonomous University. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic crisis forced us to organize this conference online. Nothing replaces human contact, but I am sure that the contribution of all speakers, chairs, and participants will make this web conference a great collective success. Allow me to take this opportunity to please ask your attention to the following logistical aspects. First, ask for and thank you for the strict observance of schedules, respecting the time for presentation and debate, and the stipulated timetables for the beginning and closing of each session. This is vital in the online mode, in face of the time differences and of successive and simultaneous panels. Second, if any session is suddenly interrupted, we never fully control the internet or the Zoom platform. Just click the same Zoom link again to return to the session. Thirdly, during the sessions, please turn the sound off so that we can all listen to the speakers in the best conditions. That is, turn the sound on only when you are talking. On the other hand, we count on recording as many panels as possible. Therefore, if any chair or speaker doesn't want to have their image and voice recorded, please let us know in advance. And those participants who want to make a comment or question without image or voice recorded, you can write your question or comment using the chat button located in the Zoom bar below. So once again, our warm thanks to all speakers, chairs, and participants for joining us in this 7th International Conference on Eurasian Politics and Society, sharing your knowledge and insights. On behalf of Observare, many thanks to you all and wishes for a very stimulating and fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Luis Tom. The floor is now Professor Rodrigues.
Thank you very much, Professor José Amado da Silva, Rector of Universidade Autónoma, Professor Ozgur Tufekci, Director of CESRAN, Professor Luís Tomé, Director of Observare, dear colleagues and students. My name is Luís Rodrigues. I'm the Director of the Center for International Studies at ISCTE in Lisbon, and we are one of the partner institutions of the Eurasian Politics and Society Conference. I will be very brief and just would like to point out that it is an honor for us to be partners again among such prestigious institutions, especially CESRAN and Universidade Autónoma and Observare in particular. I also would like to extend the greetings from my own rector of ISCTE, Professor Maria de Lourdes Rodrigues, to Professor Amado da Silva, and to the directors of the other institutions involved in this organization. This partnership, as Rector Amado da Silva has mentioned, is part of an ongoing process of deep and intense collaboration and understanding between the Center for International Studies and Observare and Universidade Autónoma. We have been collaborating in organizing scientific events like this one, and like Europe as a global actor, unfortunately cancelled in 2020, but already already planned for 2021. We have also been collaborating in joint scientific publications, academic activities, international research projects. But today we are here to open this fantastic event with a very promising program, with a strong diversity of panels, participants, diversity of topics as well. So I'm looking forward to watch and to listen to some of them. And to finish my short opening statement, I just want to wish to all participants a very fruitful conference in the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rodrigues. Thank you, Professor Rodrigues. Now, I would like to thank you to all participants at this opening session. I would like to now give the floor to Professor IUL to start the keynote speech of Professor Sakwa.
Hi, I mean, it's a great pleasure to be here, but it looks like I have a technical problem, Ozgur. It says my video is disabled by the host. I'm touching.
I'm trying to open your video. There is a problem.
Okay, yes, yes, I am back. It's such a great pleasure, of course, especially colleagues in Lisbon for hosting and also colleagues at CESRAN organizing such a timely and bringing us together in so unprecedented circumstances. I'm delighted to be here, and it's a great, great honor, of course, to moderate Professor Sakwa's keynote speech. I mean, he doesn't need any introduction as a prominent scholar of Russian and European politics at the University of Kent, or of course, an associate fellow of the fellow of Russian and Eurasian program at the Royal Institute of International Affairs. You probably know he has numerous articles and books. And the best well-known, most recent was Russia Against the Rest, and also the crisis of Russian democracy. I'm really looking forward to this intellectual engagement by listening to Professor Sakwa and also other papers in the conference.
Shall I start? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
You can't see me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I can't
Sakwa.
see you, to be honest.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you and I can hear you, Professor Sakwa.
Yes, we can see
probably
you.
You need to move from one to another, and there are many participants, so we cannot see you.
I will unmute myself and
Professor Sakwa, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just, we're a bit early, but that's good. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to join you, even though in this non-physical manner, but it's better than nothing. So I'm going to start. So my topic is stasis and change. Basically, what's changing and what's staying the same in international politics today. So that's my theme. It's a big one, and with specific emphasis on Russia and the emergence of a type of, or the struggle for an anti-hegemonic world order. A lot of people talk nowadays about the contest, the struggle of different types of hegemony. But in the sense, my deep argument is that to raise a question about whether there is a possibility of some sort of non-hegemonic world order, basically a system of sovereign states. Anyway, I'll come back to that. So I'm going to label my sections because I know how hard it is to follow online. It's very hard to concentrate and to maintain attention because, as we know, there's all the time possibilities for distractions. Anything suddenly can distract one from the speaker. But I'm arguing that after over a quarter of a century, actually 3 decades of stasis, that is, of a system which has not particularly developed, of a type of world order, things are now changing. But my argument, these are introductory comments, my argument is that there is a paradox. This change is taking place within the context of a deep impasse, dead end, in the clash of models of world order. That the paradox is that the more there is change, the deeper the impasse becomes. a dead end becomes. So it's a paradox. Lots of things are changing, and obviously the COVID pandemic has accelerated all sorts of tendencies and so on. But ultimately, my argument is, nothing is changing because there is no perspective for fundamental change. I mean, I will outline some possibilities later, but this is the framework. So stasis and change, and that's why I use the word stasis. It isn't just stability, it isn't just normality, because obviously with a pandemic hanging over our heads, we all want to get back to normality. But stasis is deeper than just simply stability. It's a sort of immobility. It's a sort of, as I say, a dead end, an impasse. But lots of things changing, of course. So that's my theme. And the big picture is, of course, that we had an inter-Cold War period of cold peace, basically 1989 to 2014, 25 years of the cold peace. But this cold peace didn't give way to a thaw, a new system, but in fact to back to the future. In other words, the return of bipolar confrontation today. I argue, as I shall explain a bit later, that we have and we're entering a second Cold War. Now, I know a lot of people don't like this term, Cold War, and I didn't used to like it either. But my argument is that this second Cold War, and why I use second, not new Cold War, second Cold War, because it differs from the first Cold War, just like the Second World War differed from the First World War. Different actors, different ideologies, different types of military technologies, different geographical scope, so loads of differences. And so people say the word Cold War doesn't apply because of these factors. But just like the Second and the First World Wars, the Second Cold War, very different. But just like the Second World War, it's a continuation of the first for unfinished business, the failure to establish a stable, enduring peace order. Just like Versailles did not open the door to a stable and enduring peace order, neither did post-1989 settlement. So we're into a second Cold War, and the big picture there is, of course, with the rise of China as a major new actor in all of this, that, and the enormity of China as a genuine peer competitor to US dominance, hegemony, that this Chinese emergence and it's challenged by not only China, but China, of course, its enormity, is that this new type of bipolarity, it isn't the only thing going on, but it's one of the things, is that the rest of the world is increasingly affected by the magnetic fields, if you like, of these two poles. That we're seeing the attempts to establish, elements of a new type of block discipline in the Atlantic system, obviously huge tensions quite clearly, yet it's a new way of managing where European Union and Russia, even on the other side, all are affected by the gravitational pull, if you like, of these two systems. That's why, of course, Russia is advancing an attempt to achieve to avoid being simply attracted by this huge gravitational pull. It's why they're trying to establish, Moscow's trying to establish a anti-hegemonic alignment. That is a different model of world order that would not give China or the United States the ability to frame the character of international politics. So that's the sort of argument I have, and obviously as part of this anti-hegemonic alignment, you have a whole set of institutions, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS over on the other side, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and of course the expansion of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization not long ago to include India and Pakistan. So bottom line, it's this attempt to drag all the states in it. And of course, still as my introductory comment, in this sort of bipolar second Cold War situation, the attempt of this, the anti-hegemonic, note, I say anti-hegemonic, not counter-hegemonic. It's against hegemony in principle, that is defined as the legitimate domination of a particular set of states or single state. The point is they don't want the domination at all. So multipolarity is another of those big elements which is in the framework in which you can have counter-hegemonic politics. And it denies or questions the idea that a single state, however powerful, and its allies can claim primacy or leadership in world affairs. So this is the framework of it. And this tries then to assert against this, hegemony of the so-called liberal international order. It asserts a different principle. I shall talk a bit more about it. But what I would say is that it goes back to the international system established in 1945. Let us call it the Yalta system. The Yalta system of sovereign states, spheres of influence, and so on. However, it's important to understand that the international system has evolved. The 1945 Yalta system was modified, let's call it symbolically and substantively, the Helsinki system, 1975, Final Act, human rights, a whole stack of normative elements involved in it. So Yalta, or when Moscow talks about Yalta, China doesn't use that term, but basically defends the international legal system established on the United Nations framework since 1945. That this system is, this Yalta-Helsinki system is the one to which Russia, China, and the anti-hegemons appeal to. So that's the framework. That's my introductory comments. I'll now give more detail and explain maybe in more substantive forms those key arguments. So what is changing, what is staying the same, and what explains that strategic impasse which I mentioned earlier as we slide into the second Cold War, which, by the way, I argue, sadly, which I think it will shape the destiny of humanity for the next generation. I can't see a substantive way out unless there is a major event. Unpredictable, the pandemic is not that event. Unless it gets second wave is much worse than the first. But all it's done is accelerate and intensify the impasse, not found a way to transcend it. It has shown the weakness of multilateral organizations, the weakness and the inability of that so-called liberal international order to obey its own rules. That is, United States leaving the World Health Organization and so on. So I'm now going to develop that in more detail, and therefore my points will be numbered. So point number one, let me say a few more words about the international system. The international system. So I mentioned it. The point is that we have enormous amount of conceptual confusion, and I don't pretend for a moment to be able to explain everything in a single universal theory of international politics, but I do try at least to establish at least a framework of some sort of intellectual framework, because what I'm arguing is that we have an international system, the one established in 1945, the one based on the United Nations, the one based on international law emanating from that, and all the norms and so on, and plenty of other bodies, including globalization bodies, which later on Bretton Woods and so on. But this international system continues to provide the international framework to this day. It was a foundational moment of a new system. I know our East European colleagues don't like the word Yalta, for good reason, of course, because it meant subjugation. It meant the limited sovereignty within bloc politics, within spheres of influence, of course, all of that negative. But there was also a positive to the Yalta system, which was the recognition of the sovereignty of independent states. And it was within the framework of that international system that decolonization took place, that the British Empire was dismantled and all the other great empires, including the Portuguese Empire in Africa and elsewhere. So this international system, the Yalta system, was important. And as I said, it was then modified at Helsinki to include certain normative features. So the Yalta Helsinki system, which is extraordinarily, is still our framework today. And we can compare this to other international systems which have endured for decades. Obviously, the first one, there was plenty of Christendom and so on before, but obviously for modern international politics, it's Westphalia in 1648, sovereign states. The obvious second one was the Vienna system from 1815, which provided a framework for international politics effectively for nearly 100 years. There were wars, but basically a very long peace in Europe. And so this was based on spheres of influence, anti-revolutionism, and so on. The third international system was the Versailles model of liberal institutionalism and neo-colonialism, designed in 1919. This third international system was a failure on all sorts of respects. The League of Nations didn't take root, though it established a framework and lessons to be learned by our system, the 1945 system, the fourth one, and the one which lasts to this day. So when people today keep talking about the crumbling of world order, they talk about this endless change and catastrophe. So yes, elements of it, but the international system still based on multilateralism, based on international law, based on the equality of all states, except for the privileged managerial role of the permanent members of the Security Council, which of course means that they all states, 193 members of the United Nations this week. We are celebrating indeed the 75th anniversary. It would have been a Jubilee week this week with lots of summits, and of course there was talk, and Putin, Vladimirovich, earlier this year in Jerusalem called for an extended meeting or a summit meeting of the 5 great powers, but of course that has not been able to take place. So that's all we're echoing that international system. But the operative code, the bottom line, the operative code of this international system is sovereign internationalism. Sovereign internationalism. I stress this because it is not the same as the old-fashioned Westphalian politics. It draws on it, but it is based on internationalism. It is 1945, try to learn the lessons of 1919 and 1815, let alone 1648. So it has this international system, is of sovereign states, multipolarity, yet internationalism embedded in international law, the UN Charter, which has enormous amount of normative power to it, and of course developed by Helsinki. But this system is hugely important. It's, maybe I'm going into too much detail, but just to say very briefly, this international system has 3 layers to it. 3 layers to it. Oh, it's like a building, 3 stories in a building. The top story is the one which is, the multilateral institutions of global governance. I've mentioned the United Nations and its 5 permanent members, and also the ramified UN agencies, like the World Health Organization, obviously, as well as the other bodies established to manage global financial and economic affairs. Later on, the World Trade Organization, and so on. This is the framework for international legal and environmental covenants, as well as those covering the rules of war, international humanitarian practices. So a lot of things on this top floor. You know, some of us in England are very, well, I am certainly very keen on the English school thinking, and my thinking is shaped in many ways, they're modifying it. So this takes us to the second level. It's at the second level that we have competing states. So we have the international system, 3 layers. It's in the second level that we have not only competing states governed by the primary institutions of international society, as the English school would say, governed by you know, the various elements, diplomacy, rules of war, and so on. So this middle floor is where you have competing states, but you also have competing orders. I shall later on of one of my points will outline these different world orders, but we have, just to suggest now, we have, of course, the we have in that framework the liberal international order. We also have the counter-hegemonic order with Russia and China, India as a member, in some ways, other states as well. So this is the middle floor, states and world orders. Then we have, and often, and I before didn't really adequately integrate this into my model of the international system, but on the ground floor, at the bottom of it all, though bottom is not in terms of hierarchy of value, because the bottom is the foundation, and that is where we have civil society groups. This is where we have think tanks, policy institutes, media outlets, the public sphere, civil institutions and associations, where they all try to shape the landscape of politics, where we have obviously today enormous influential groups pushing the environmental agenda to deal with the climate catastrophe, and also movements fighting for racial and historical justice. We've seen a lot of that over the last few months. As well as grassroots nationalism and grassroots populism. This is where we have all of these elements, including, of course, epidemiological policies and institutions. So this is my international system. 3 layers, all interacting with each other, all working, and all in many ways changing, because quite clearly one of the big changes, you know, talking about stasis and change, one of the big changes in recent years has been the weakening of international law. And in fact, again, to go ahead a little bit, the very idea of what our dear leader, previous leader, Theresa May used to say, the rules-based order. Rules-based order meaning, what does it mean? We don't know. What it should be talking about is old-fashioned international law. So that's where it goes on. Just one final point, and still talking about my international system. Do international institutions matter? Now, my good friend John Mearsheimer from Chicago, great thinker, argues, and we've had this debate over many years, in fact, at a meeting in Berlin not long ago. I outlined a different version of this, and he said, and he's argued, as you know, international institutions do not matter. The only thing that matters is states. Absolute fundamentalist, realist position. But having listened to me, he accepted, just as we were leaving, grabbed me by the shoulder and said, well, you know, I'll give you this. International institutions matter 2%. So I'm always grateful. I said, John, thank you for that 2%. It's, I think it's more than 2%. But he acknowledged at least that international institutions matter. I actually think that's quite wrong. I actually think they matter a lot. Obviously, they're not determining. The United Nations is under challenge. It has always been under challenge by the United States, by the great powers. Of course, if you're a great power, you don't want to be limited by law, you don't want to be constrained by institutions, and you don't want other smaller little minor states to influence and shape your policies. So obviously, and of course, John, as obviously a critic of US policies, but nevertheless, coming from the US, doesn't quite see it like that. So that's my first point, the international system, arguing bottom line, institutions matter. My second point is to argue about orders within the system. So we have this international system, and then we have world orders, models of world order, and different understandings of globalism, different understandings of what the global system works like. So up to 1989, two major world orders predominated, that bipolar world. We had the US dominated, well, the political West, the Atlantic power system, historical West, call it what you like. After I shall say this again, but after 1989, this Atlantic alliance, NATO, and so on, rebranded itself, I can go into more detail later, as the liberal international order. But so basically, we had two, and on the other, we had this one, the Atlantic power system, and on the other side, we had the Soviet bloc, and of course, the Soviet bloc. And of course, we had other non-aligned states. The Chinese talked about a third world, refusing to accept the gravitational pull of these two. You had a non-aligned movement, but basically, you had a bipolar system. But of course, since 1989, we have not. And we had, in a sense, a unipolar moment. And that was a feature of that Cold Peace. The Cold Peace from 1989 to 2014 was dominated by a unipolar system, which clearly had all sorts of issues, which I shall go into. But to keep moving along, we have, what I'm basically saying is you have this international system, which I can imagine as a computer. And then we have four operative codes you put into the computer, just like you have Microsoft or you have Apple Mac system. So two different types of system like that. And what too much analysis does is confuse the system, well, the hardware and the software of the international order. So this is the way I look at it. I'm going to list now 4 models of world order. 4 models of world order. Still the second point. So these are the models, and what are they? Of course, I can't go into too much detail now, to yours on earlier work, but I'm arguing there's 4. And obviously, you could argue a 5th, which was Daesh, Islamic State, which of course was a model in Ummah, and of course there's loads and loads of marginal ones. But 4 big, serious models of world order. The first one, I called it sovereign or conservative internationalism. Sovereign or conservative internationalism, which is based indeed on the Yalta-Helsinki principles. This is the Yalta modified by Helsinki, respect for the independence and sovereignty of smaller states. So I won't go into too much detail about this, but sovereign internationalism is not simply a return to Westphalian politics. People say China, Moscow, Russia are simply Westphalian states. I've had this argument with, Eikenberry, Dudney, and all of the others who just condemn it. Moscow, Beijing, etc., as old-fashioned Westphalians. That is a mistake, because they're defending sovereignty, yes. They defend it ferociously, yes. They will not accept the hegemony, dominance of the United States and Atlantic power system, yes. But at the same time, they propose a model of internationalism based on the 1945 principles of sovereign independent states within the framework of the international law established in 1945 and the UN. So, they stress the importance of global governance institutions. That's why the paradox today, Moscow and Beijing defending multilateralism. China, of course, famously defending globalization in Davos. I think it was 2013, 2014. So it's, all of these elements. And we have sovereign internationalism at the foundation of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We have sovereign internationalism at the heart of the BRICS organization, and so on. So, and of course, within that framework, the Russia, India, China triangle, however stressed it is at the moment, it's still a triangle going on. So that's the first model of world system. That's the software of that one. The second model of world order is the liberal international order. The US-led, as they like to put it, which was born in the early years of the 20th century, formulated by Woodrow Wilson, of course, at the end of the First World War, a commitment to an Atlantic-based system of universal order. It always had a universalism at its heart. So it was a specific, particular order which claimed this universalism through human rights, 14 points, etc. This has been the most vigorous, hugely successful, dynamic world order of our times. And it has the expansive dynamic of universal rules, economic interactions, transforming much of the world in its image. With enormous positivity, dynamism, developmentalism, accompanied by a very dark side, of course, as well, of wars, endless wars, militarism, and literally blocking alternative developmental paths, interventions in Latin America, etc., etc. Still, but the liberal international order has changed over the years. And I argue it had three phases in its development, the LIO, three phases in its development. The first one was the liberal order based on Wilsonian internationalism and the Atlantic Charter of August 1941. So this Atlantic Charter is a hugely important. August 1941, Churchill and Roosevelt met off Newfoundland. Of course, this is August 1941. The United States was not yet at war. Hence, they couldn't talk about war, though they did behind the scenes, and the US provided a lot of support to the UK, standing alone against Hitler's Germany. But because they couldn't really openly talk about war, they talked about values and norms. And these are important ones, democracy and so on, the Atlantic Charter. So that was, and this is what fed into that 1945 Yalta Order. So Yalta isn't simply the Soviet domination. It's created by the great powers all the way from Tehran, Casablanca, etc., and Potsdam. This was the first phase. Rather modest order, by the way, ultimately, fairly modest, anti-colonial, multilateral institutions, so on, which even within its own terms evolved with the Bretton Woods end of controlled capital markets and so on. Anyway, the second phase of this liberal international order developed after 1989. The only surviving system, the Soviet collapse, and China still marginal. This was the development after 1989, it's radicalization, the radicalization of the liberal international order with R2P, a lot of other elements, validation of humanitarian internationalism, not sovereign internationalism, but humanitarian internationalism. My colleague at the University of Kent, Philip Cunliffe, has just done an excellent book precisely talking about, I didn't call it this, but basically talking about cosmopolitan dystopia, international intervention and the failure of the West. That's Philip Cunliffe's new book. But, this has shifted. And obviously, I don't agree with him entirely. I think he makes a lot of important arguments because humanitarian intervention, in my view, has a legitimate and important part to play in international politics for obvious reasons. Based indeed on the 1945 principles against genocide. So you don't have to talk about 1989. This is a fundamental, foundational element of the Yalta system established in 1945, the Genocide Convention a bit later. So this was the element. So this, then the third phase began at the moment of the liberal order's greatest power. And so this third phase began roughly 2010s, such like, where basically this was the liberal order entered into a whole stack of contradictions. And in the sense, because this liberal order, it suffered from all elements of hubris and the exhaustion of liberalism, not because of its dynamism, but because internally it also suffered from stasis. We were the victors, they would argue, after 1989. Therefore, we don't need to change. We just keep NATO and keep enlarging it. And if Moscow doesn't like it, then it can just have to lump it. It's just crazy sort of stuff like that. Obviously important. NATO may well have an enduring and important part to play. But the failure to embed NATO in a common security system, and plenty of people talked about it earlier on, but they were rejected. So, but basically, so this third phase, where we now find ourselves in, the expansive liberal order met its limits, both domestically, and this is the rise of populism in the United States, vicious political polarization, national populism, and indeed revival of leftist internationalism. But so that's the second model of the third model of world order today. Let us call it mercantilist internationalism. Mercantilist internationalism. This is the system which is gaining increasing traction today. This is the transactional and mercantilist approach adopted by Trump and various national populist movements. Again, we should be aware that Trump, of course, a unique individual, but he is the culmination, he is a representation of all sorts of internal contradictions, both in US domestic politics and on the global stage. The commitments which the US has made to the defense of other states, runs into contradiction for US domestic interest and also at the globalization level. Of course, he expresses it in very simplistic and crude and indeed almost anti-internationalist forms. Yet it's a logical development which of course long predated Trump. In fact, in many ways already Obama was trying to deal with some of these issues. Bush Jr. tried to deal with it through violence and war, and Obama through peace, intelligent negotiation, and so on. But they were all trying to grasp, how this liberal or the Atlantic power system has to evolve. But of course, this mercantilist internationalism, revolt against globalization, and of course, revolt against the excesses of globalization, not necessarily globalization itself, because clearly there were fundamental issues, the inability of countries to develop, for example, a developed statist industrial strategy, leading in the UK to contradictions between the North and the South, between cities and the countryside, between industrial and new technologies and so on, instead of trying to find a way of combining these and achieving geographical, class, race, justice. It failed on all sorts of levels. And the result, of course, was Brexit, which was a symptom before Trump of what was going on. In the United States, the big issue is, of course, and one which I will stress, is militarism. Militarism, what Michael Glennon calls the Trumanite state. Again, this failure of the liberal international order, the Atlantic power system, to examine itself after 1989, instead led to the huge growth of the military, what that communist Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex in his farewell speech. And of course, this two-minute state developed as a part of the First Cold War, and why it is now feeding into the Second Cold War. This vast US defense budget is absurd. US infrastructure collapsing, health, welfare systems, you know, it's crazy, and it's quite clear. You know, Mearsheimer talks about it. Stephen Walt, in his marvelous new book, again, when he talks about liberal hegemony, talks about the failures. You know, the Stephen Walt's book on the dangers of, you know, the perverse effects of good intentions. So that's the third model, mercantilist international populism, call it what you like. The fourth type of internationalism, or fourth model of world order, let me call it transformative or revolutionary internationalism. It's there, it's niggling away at the background. It's the one represented until 1991 by the Soviet Union and its allies, which in the 50s included China. So this was an attempt to transform international politics, but of course, the Soviet Union became a deeply conservative state at the end. Revolutionary socialism, in other words, is no longer the source of transformative change, but evolutionary socialism may be. We see the emergence of socialist agendas in the UK. The election of Jeremy Corbyn as head of the Labour Party is a symptom of it. Of course, you know, in terms of actual votes gained, it was hugely popular, but it failed obviously catastrophically in December 2019. But so we're trying to say that what are the sources of transformational social relations? And, you know, people would say this epidemiological events, this particular one at the moment, the pandemic, will change it. You know, decarbonization is accelerating as a result of this. New digital technologies, artificial intelligence. This is where that technosphere affects international politics as well, and changes the character of war with drones and you know, intelligent war-making machines. But at the same time, you know, the environmental issues have been stressed, for example, by Mikhail Gorbachev, the great transformer from earlier years. The non-aligned movement is still not, still alive, still fighting out there. So I just put this as a first model, a fourth model, which is a more, you know, socially based visions of the world. So, okay, this is my second section. The first one was the model of international politics. The second one is these models of world order. Now, my third point is called the Great Substitution. The Great Substitution. I argued that the liberal international order changed over the years. Various phases in its evolution. We talked about that. The 1919 version, the one after 1989, and the one today. But when the Cold War ended, the liberal international order was the only surviving system with genuinely universal aspirations. Russia was dealing with its own catastrophe. China was still quietly rising. India was dealing with its own issues in its usual way. Then, of course, you had a mixture of dominion, which is a power system, and norms. Dominion and, so in other words, empire and liberal values. Hence the whole vast literature which talks about liberal empire. But so dominion was one of those key elements, which I want to, you know, I don't want to use the word empire because it has all sorts of implications and such like, but let's just simply say, call it dominion. So you had enormous elements of all of this. And basically, this liberal international order is no more than a fancy name for the Atlantic power system. After 1989, the Atlantic Alliance, transatlantic system, called itself the liberal international order. It's the same thing, though with greater universal aspirations. So it was, this is the substitution was that and this is one of those great destabilizing elements today, that a specific order claimed to be synonymous with the international system. That is the axis on which the Second Cold War is fought. It is fought against this universalism of the Atlantic power system in its liberal international guise, with, on the other side, counter-hegemonic forces who are not, who are arguing, no, we defend that 1945 Yalta-Helsinki system. So we have an order claiming to substitute for the system, claiming to be the system. This is where, this is where the tension rises. China, of course, for a long time was willing to accept this substitution. Both, it never accepted it internally and psychologically and philosophically, but it accepted it pragmatically because it was taking advantage of it. I don't mean that in a negative sense. It was using the framework for achieving huge developmental goals. And I won't list them all, but you all know it. It was doing, but it could do it because after 1989, and I'm quoting various articles in international journal, International Politics on this, which basically China after 1989, despite Tiananmen, was offered a great deal. It had a good bargain, a good deal from Washington. It was basically, you get on, develop, basically have very open and free access to the US market, technologies, and so on. And of course, the Chinese brilliantly took advantage of that in the best way, and it is where it is today. Moscow, after 1989, was offered a lousy deal, but it had its positives. It said you could join this Atlantic power system, the liberal international order, as a minor part of it. Moscow, of course, Russia in the 1990s was in major economic, political crisis, constitutional crisis as well. So you can join it and, everything will be fine. But it was a lousy deal. You would join it, but you'd have to remain and indeed formalize your subaltern status. You'd say, well, why couldn't Moscow accept it? After all, in the 1960s, the United Kingdom, well, after 1956, let's say, the United Kingdom and France gave up their empires. They gave up their claims to be equal world powers, Moscow, Washington, London, and Paris. And look, they did quite well in all of that. Give up empire, give up pretensions to be a great power, accept US leadership and dominance. And look how well they've done in all sorts of ways. However, France, of course, reinvented itself after 1956 as the leader of European integration. It had a mission and a purpose to it. Of course, France will never give up its pretensions to world leadership, and thank heavens for that. And so that's all very good. The United Kingdom, of course, had no idea what it was going to do. Instead of which it's emphasized its special relationship, the fact that it was the most loyal of Washington's allies, etc. And that was a humiliating, marginalizing role, and of course led on to Brexit and led on to all sorts of bad things. But this great substitution. So in where we have dominion and hegemony, war and the norms of it. So this, the Atlantic power system radicalized itself. It offered a bad deal to Moscow, a good deal to China. All those deals, Moscow could not accept becoming let alone Berlin or Tokyo, Japan or Germany, because Russia never accepted defeat in the Cold War. It was one of the victors of the Cold War, even though in difficulties. And this helps explain why this great substitution was rejected in Moscow, and in China it was only accepted contingently, and today it is now repudiated. Both in Washington and in Moscow. Washington is trying to take back that good deal it had offered Beijing earlier. So a great substitution took place. That is the framework in which this, all this change in context, but it just shows you, it's an impasse. At the beginning I mentioned that this is a dead end of politics, an impasse. So lots of change going on, but this fundamental impasse between the claims of the liberal international order, of this Atlantic power system, to be universal. And it's plenty of powerful norms, which, you know, are also part of the Yalta-Helsinki norms. So it's not, in other words, these norms do not belong to the West. This is the English school had, you know, it's often argued that these norms are independent of any particular state. It isn't just simply a way of this developing since the establishment of, well, you know, of the expansion of international society, expansion of the West. They don't belong to the West. That was one of the major achievements of 1945 in the Yalta system and the United Nations. The Arab world was involved, the Soviet world was involved. China, of course, was still in civil war, but it was also involved. But this substitution after 1989 is the impasse that between this universalism and particularism. Of course, it's being eroded from within by mercantilist international and Trumpian sort. So let me move on to my fourth point, which is problems of hegemony today. Hegemony defined as legitimate rule of a dominant power. The point was that in this system of sovereign internationalism, there should not be a dominant power, a single dominant power, because that is a return to old-fashioned. This is one of the contradictions at the heart of the liberal international order. One moment they talk about excellent norms, excellent ideas of cosmopolitanism, of freedom of movement, and so on. Yet at the same time, this other side of it, domination, dominion. And dominion is today a representation of that vast US military command. Again, United Kingdom after Brexit is working with it, and you know, endless provocations of freedom of navigation exercises, now moving into the Barents Sea, the Arctic. Last week, 38 times the United States and the United Kingdom and its allies approached by sea and by air Russia's borders, 38 times. So this is provocation. This is a sign of a dominion which doesn't understand its limits and its dangers, heading for war, quite clearly. That's why I call it a second Cold War. A second Cold War without the rules of war and how to manage it, which were established after the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is the problem of hegemony today, that it's simply, you know, it cannot accept dominion. As I say, it could not defend this Atlantic power system that Moscow and Beijing, and indeed New Delhi and many other countries could not fully accept it, this hegemony either. I just want to stress that Russia's stance, Moscow's stance, is not simply a reactionary defense of the Yalta system. As I've said, it's also modified by Helsinki. So it is more complicated than that. So that's my fourth point, that, you know, there's a lot of debate about hegemony, but when you talk about hegemony, I think we should also add this extra term, dominion, there as well. Power, military power, and the way that the world is divided and structured. My fifth point is the end of stasis, but continuation of impasse. Lots of things changing. Lots of things changing. You know, some of you will have heard of the Valdai International Discussion Club, where they've done 2 reports where they use the word crumbling. The system basically disintegrating. And I keep telling them, friends, you keep confusing orders and the system. That the US-led liberal international order is definitely crumbling under the weight of its internal and external contradictions. It is balanced by Chinese, Russian ideas of sovereign internationalism and indeed Indian. It is also challenged by destructive forces, the mercantilist internationalism of Trump and various other populists and nationalists. And but it's also more positively challenged by grassroots movements. For example, as I keep saying, you know, even say socialism is back on the agenda. Socialist internationalism, which we used to mock. I never did. I think it's important that their socialist internationalism is another way forwards. So lots of things changing. So my fifth point, so you have now major shifts taking place in the international system. So in other words, what's changing? And we can say, I just said the liberal international system is under challenge, but also this international system established in 1945. It's challenged, of course, by the universalism, US-led universalism of the liberal international order. Hence, that's a paradox, of course, because of this substitution. It's claiming we are the only viable world order. We have difficulties, therefore world order is crumbling and international system is collapsing. I'd say no, because the international system is separate and independent from that world order. So major shifts taking place, Amitav Acharya, one of the most powerful and intelligent commentators, talks about the new system as multiplex, but all of these are within the international system. What we're seeing, of course, is a direct challenge to that international system of Yalta and Helsinki by attacks on the United Nations. This week, as I said, the 75th anniversary, a lot of elements within all of that. So, there's a lot of things. So my sixth point, what are the new ideas? And part of the impasse is that there are no new ideas. That it's, for years, Marxists would claim to be able to infuse into the debates original ideas. And nothing. For years, our third world colleagues and friends also thought they could put into this debate new ideas and so on. Environmentalism, of course, from the grassroots is a huge one. Decarbonization, it will have huge implications for state-run oil companies, energy companies, and domestic organization. Yes, but the international system, no. So these are alternatives. Then you'd say, look, are Russia's ideas for alternatives in international politics? No, I don't think Russia has is defending sovereign internationalism, and that's important. But that's not new, but it's an important defense. Russia does look backward-looking, and fair enough, because it's defending 1945, which gives it its privileged position as a member of the P5. So that's good. Does China bring new ideas to the table in international politics? Well, to a point. Its language is certainly inspirational and marvelous in terms of win-win situations, etc. But then again, we have issues domestically. We could even say, use the word dominion within its domestic politics, which has implications for external stance.
Sakwa, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to finish this session. If you want to give any, it's a food for thought. I'm sure there are so many questions. If you want to give at least 5 minutes opportunity for Q&A, I will appreciate if you could finish in 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's fine, no problem. I was looking at the clock and I was going to go to 11, but thank you for saying that. I was just thinking, that'd be excellent to have it. So maybe then I'll just wrap up with my seventh point. My seventh point would be, well, what possibilities are there for transformation? The logic we've had since 1989 is enlargement of the Atlantic power system. Enlargement and intensification domestically. But what Moscow, Beijing says, look, we need to, and India, others, we need transformation. We need a change, to a multi-order world, multiplex world, such like maybe new definitions. There's, as you know, today, civilization states is part of the discourse of international politics. We're also faced by deglobalization and such like. Bottom line, though, is there a way out of the impasse? If I had more time, I would outline certain ones, but the answer ultimately is no. So we have stasis, lots of change, but a continued dead end in international politics where the contradictions which were not resolved after 1989 have become intensified, giving rise to a second Cold War, and I'm afraid a generational long confrontation. And on that happy note, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it has been a feast of ideas, such a brilliant analysis of the international system, which made me to think about actually English school, White's question about is there international theory? So it looks like we are at the dead end, but I'm glad you finished with a positive note. I'm sure there are questions, as you know how the system works. We have become that Zoom kind of question and answer with the chat. If there is any question from our host in Lisbon, please unmute yourself. We have only 5 minutes left for Q&A. Any questions either in the chat or
there are two participants with the hand, Raman and Andrew Leung. This is what I'm seeing. And also Sonia Senek is saying she's having a question on chat.
Yeah, I mean, Professor Sakwa, would you like to just go through the chat or shall I just read if there are any questions there? Yeah, I think Sonia Senica, you have a question. Yeah, do you want to type or just unmute yourself? Maybe it's easier if you unmute.
I can, because we have short time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hello to everyone. I would like to briefly pose my question, if I may. So, Professor Sakwa, I need to start to say that it's a huge privilege for me to listen to you, but we don't have any time to keep going on this impression of mine. So I'm going to pose my question, which is, you talked about the second Cold War, and we have like two poles, like United States on the one side and China on the other side. I mean, about Russia, you think that this new state of affairs, this tension with the West, especially in Europe, with the European Union, I mean, which will be the place to put things straight between them? I mean, President Macron on the last minute security conference gave us a kind of a doctrine, a proposal. Do you agree? Is it possible? And thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you very much for the question. Excellent. Just if I was to choose one question, that would be the one, which is basically, where does Moscow and Brussels fit in with all of this? And should they be getting together? It's quite clear that, it's an emerging, it's a tendency now we have of this new bipolarity, Beijing, Washington, in which the smaller powers have to choose and are forced to choose, even though they all say we don't want to. But quite clearly, we've seen that both Moscow and Brussels have been marginalized, increasingly marginalized. We can see it even within the alliance system. Brussels and indeed the European Union in terms of the joint comprehensive Iran nuclear deal. It just, Instex, I think, was used once to try to avoid US dominion and hegemony. As for Moscow, it's a complex relationship between Moscow and Beijing. And I certainly don't regard Russia as a junior partner. They come to the table with different things. Yet that huge gravitational field is beginning to achieve that. So Macron, yes, that marvelous speech to diplomats in August last year, 2019. I have it on my table, and it's one of the great speeches. And I said, most important speech in Europe in 20 years. Now, for me, as an old Gaullist, it was marvelous to hear Gaullism is back. In Britain, I was often condemned for spouting or advocating what Lord Hannay, our former representative to the United Nations, called it the Gaullist heresy when I talked about these things. But my argument is precisely that this Gaullist heresy of a common European home, the Gorbachev heresy, is fundamentally important. It is crazy that every time Macron comes up with this idea and others, then we have a Navalny poisoning, we have Skripal poisoning, we have something. Like the devil is at work. preventing it, and Nord Stream 2, and so on. But I still believe that we have to move to a détente, not alliance, entente, a rapprochement between Berlin, well, between Moscow and Western Europe. It's, but the reason why I'm pessimistic about the impasse, I can see no way forwards, no way forwards. At one moment, the departure of the United Kingdom from the European Union looked as if it would open the door to better relations, because London, obviously, first most loyal to the dominion elements of the United States hegemony, and of course, most virulently anti-Moscow, together with the Baltic states, etc., Poland. But again, it doesn't seem to work. But it's on the agenda, but it won't be soon. And so Macron outlined an agenda and important arguments, but unfortunately the tendency is moving the other way, an intensification of the contradictions between Moscow and the West European partners.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sakwa. I think there is just on the chat, Professor Sakwa. Can you see it from Raman?
Yes, I can see Raman Dag. I'll answer that question about the about how the impasse is going to be solved. But one way of solving it is indeed war, as the questionnaire puts it. I actually think that if we have a second Cold War, we're lucky. That's good. It's not bad, guys. It's good because it shows its limitations and self-restraint and so on. What in my more pessimistic moments is that we're heading, I mean, it's quite clearly the endless provocations from us, and Russia responding in kind, of course. So no one has a monopoly on virtue. So it's very, very difficult. And including, we're seeing an intensification of conflict in the US occupied parts of Syria against international law. We're seeing all sorts of things going on, literally very close. We've had military incidents. We've got deconfliction regime there, but also on the new Iron Curtain, there's endless probing in the Arctic, in the Barents Sea, in the Black Sea. This is going to end very badly unless we, and of course, if Biden is elected, change of leadership is a second way of doing it. Full-scale war, change of leadership. Well, Biden, in terms of this, is worse than Trump. At least Trump wanted to get on. He kept saying it makes sense to get on with Russia. Biden is an out-and-out thing, and he's got skeletons in his cupboard because of his relations with Ukraine and so on. So, but ultimately, the only way out is diplomacy. Diplomacy, old-fashioned Yalta-style diplomacy, accepting great powers by not subjugating small powers, of course. No one accepts that, but accepting the responsibility of leadership by the major powers: Germany, France, not United Kingdom, but the other, India and Indonesia, Mexico, so many who will all suffer. So diplomacy, dialogue, but the D word is, I'm afraid, delegitimated nowadays.
I think this is a great pleasure. Thank you so much. We need, because we are using the same Zoom link, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank you. We can't clap all together, but I'm sure all the participants have it. Oh, okay, they are virtually clapping. If we do virtually clapping, thank you so much. And look forward to seeing you in the next session in 3 minutes.
I've got to see some students, I'm afraid, in a few moments. There we go, we're back in term time. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much.